order this special city council meeting on April 11th, 2018. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let the roll call show that everyone is here. Judy?
Gotcha.
Approval of the agenda. Does anyone have anything to add?
I'd like to get rid of old business number 1. No.
Glad everyone's
I move the
comic
agenda.
bug today. That's good.
Second.
Okay. We will move on to public comment. Please state your name and address, please.
My name is Don Beagle, 1089 Chestnut Lane, going on 40 years as a resident of South Lyon. Two things before I start. Chief, thanks for what you've been doing. You know, you've taken a bad situation for the city, and you've done it before, and you're doing it again. And there's a lot of us out there that appreciate what you're doing. Thank you. Thank you. And then, Councilman Kennedy, the comments you made Monday night about the leaves. This was a fiery situation years ago, has the potential to be a fiery situation. And that's the thinking that, you know, how do you solve a problem and everybody benefits, and that's what we're looking for. I've been kind of on a listening tour since nobody wanted to run for mayor, talking to people around town. Mayor Pelchat, members of the City Council, I stand before you today encouraged. Encouraged that this meeting is taking place. Encouraged that you have the self-awareness to call a meeting of this nature. Encouraged that we may be finally turning a page in South Lyon and city government. For too long, we've watched insults, character assassinations, and childish behavior rule the council. We the people are sick of the election manipulations, sick of the us against them divisions on council. This is inappropriate council behavior. We do not believe that attacks on public servants, the DPW, police department, or private citizens is appropriate council behavior. This body is the liaison between the people and city management. This body here is to represent, the body is here to represent the people, not degrade them. This body is here to build consensus, not build barriers. From this point forward, you all have an opportunity to change the image of council. From this point forward, a lot of us in town will be able to determine who is advocating on behalf of the residents of South Lyon or who is advocating on their own behalf. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well said.
Well, with that, we'll move on to old business, and I'll kind of just get us started here really quick. And to piggyback off of the public comment, I kind of have a similar feeling about tonight. Is I think this is a great opportunity for us to take advantage of structure and making these meetings more efficient. And so I'm very optimistic that we're going to come out of this in being better for it tonight. So Councilmember Kennedy, if you'd like to get us going tonight.
Okay.
Please
I
do.
appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. So regarding the subject of council meeting conduct, we've discussed this subject previously. So I'd like to begin the discussion by proposing the following format for public comments during our city council meeting. First, I would recommend that public comments be formally established on the agenda following the approval of the agenda as it is now. Secondly, I would recommend another section for public comments be included at the conclusion of the agenda just prior to council comments. I would recommend that both public comments sections allow for the public to discuss items that are both on the agenda as well as those that are not. I would recommend that the allowed time for individuals to speak be limited to 2 minutes during both public comments sections. As an individual who stood before this body 3 months ago, I can personally attest to the fact that you can convey a significant amount of information during that time frame if you are organized and well prepared. Further, as my previous research indicated, most other municipalities and government agencies typically only allow 2 to 3 minutes to speak, and at only one point during that meeting. We, in turn, would be doubling the number of times the public can address the council and increasing the provided time by 33%. Finally, should a member of the council require additional information from an individual in the audience during discussion of an agenda item, I would recommend that the council member make their request to the mayor to obtain that information from that person, as Councilmember Kurtzwell did during our recent council meeting with regard to the liquor control license. And finally, the established time limits for public discussion should be clearly documented on the agenda, as well as the expectation that all discussions will be conducted in a polite and respectful manner. I believe this overall approach will help us improve the manner in which we conduct our city council meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think that's a great start to tonight's discussion. Would anyone like to add on to that at all? Councilmember Parisian?
Absolutely. I think there's a few moving parts to this, though. I agree wholeheartedly with Councilmember Kennedy. I just was wondering, for format purposes, are we going to break this down into parts such as decorum, time limits, who's going to be keeping that time limit, who is going to be, just different time limits, the moving parts that go along with this. I think we should address each and every one tonight so that we're clear going forward.
I think that's why we're here. I mean, and let's take advantage of that.
Okay, well, I'm all in favor of 2 minutes for public comment at the beginning and public comment at the end. Based upon the research that I've done, usually there isn't 2 public comment sections. So there's a 3-minute time limit for public comment, and that's just for one allowance to speak. So for us to allow residents to come forward at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting, I think we should, instead of giving them 3 minutes, give them 2, because they're already being allowed the chance to speak twice.
I'm just throwing this out there so everyone knows kind of where I'm at on this too. I'm all for the second public comment. I think it's much needed, and I think it's going to help us immensely for even our citizens and us too, on being able to hear back from everyone. That's not the only time people can reach out to us either, though. So I don't want people to feel like 2 minutes isn't enough. Is 3 minutes too much? I don't even think it's going to come into play a whole lot. So if it's a minute here or there, I'm willing to go either way on it. Whatever everyone feels on it. I think 2's good. I think 3's fine. I don't think 3's going to come into play a whole lot. I think, not to go off on a tangent here, we should definitely include on who's going to keep time. I have no problem putting a little timer up here. I feel like our notes our minutes, for these meetings are taken very thoroughly, and I don't feel like that's fair to throw another, hurdle at our city clerk or whoever happens to be taking the minutes that night. So I would have no problem just having a timer that's set for whatever the minutes are, clearly in play for whoever's speaking. Start it. When they're done, if we have a second comment, just restart it. And I think that should be pretty easy.
Would you be also willing to cut the person off or interject and say, like, hey, I'm sorry, your time is up?
That would be that's my role.
Okay.
as being the chair of the meeting. They can see it, obviously will be able to see it. If they're going to have another opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting, they could then ask for maybe an additional time at that point in time. But yes, I'm not planning on gaveling them, but I would remind them that their time is up.
I just want to make sure you're comfortable.
Yes, no, that's fine. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Councilmember Kibble.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to weigh in on that, because I think that when somebody's making their comments, you'll be able to discern a sense of where they're at in their comments. if they're going to need another 30 seconds to wrap things up, I don't think that we should end up being so driven by the clock that we don't use common sense on letting someone present their whole thought. If they are repeating themselves, obviously it's not necessary to give them any more time. But
Right.
if they're on a path to get someplace, I think that you'll be able to recognize that opportunity to give them a chance to finish up their thought. And personally, I think that there was some consideration in my mind to try to get a sense of council whether to allow someone to continue or not. I think that you have the sense to recognize where somebody's at. So I don't think that that's necessary. And secondly, I'm thinking that the second opportunity, although it would give somebody a chance to embellish what they had said and maybe extrapolate a little bit further on it, it's also going to be valuable for someone that comes in late
Right.
or someone to reflect on a decision that we've made during the course of the meeting, to throw in their opinion or just make a statement on that. So, and I don't have a problem with the 2-minute thing as long as we're using common sense and not being, too punitive about holding them to that. Because, people get up there and they're quite nervous to begin
yes.
with. So
Yep.
allowing them another 30 seconds isn't going to hurt something.
Carl, did you have anything?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I
Yeah, go
have
ahead.
a number of little things I want to weigh in on. Okay, as all of you here know, I've spoken many times here as a citizen activist at council meetings, also at planning commission meetings where they conduct it a little differently than we do here. What you don't know is that going back 20 years or more, I've spoke out of town, Whitmore Lake, Ann Arbor, Northville, Brighton, okay, other meetings where there was a timekeeper in these meetings, okay? And just for the sake of weighing in on Glenn's point of view and Mary's, okay, Steve's, okay, there was a timekeeper, and we're talking about meetings with big 25, 30 people, okay? All right. You had 5 minutes max, 4 minutes to start with, and they had a official timer, had a little meter, and he clicked it on, it started running, you could hear it ticking softly. At 4 minutes, it rang 1 bell. At 5 minutes, it rang 2 bells, and you had to quit, okay? Everybody got along with that method of doing things. Another possibility is, in an orderly manner, is an hourglass. A 4-minute hourglass right here on the table, turn it over, it starts, then you got a 2-minute hourglass and go for 6 minutes if the person requested that from you and at the start, and I think it should go smoothly. Also, the use of our screen. Okay, why not? Can't we project the new council conduct minutes and citizen comment minutes right behind us so they can all read it? And digitally, it seems like we could have a little sand timer in there. What do you call it? It could be done, it would seem to me, that it runs right there. And they could see for themselves where the time is running on their comments. Also, another thing to consider is doing it the way the school board does it when they're in here. You have to submit a piece of paper down to the clerk here, and they pass it on down to the chairman or the other person. So-and-so would like to speak, 5 minutes. I don't see why we couldn't look at that or try it as an alternative if you have a lot of people and it's wall-to-wall, which is seldom, but just the same. Using the screen, I've already mentioned. The hourglass. Personally, people, I've had public speaking in college 2 or 3 times. I wasn't the greatest at it. I never had an opportunity or occasion to use it in my professional working time, but I have done it in public, and I think about the tenements of it when I'm trying to get something across in a concise manner to people. And I appreciate that previous mayors Ted Wallace, and John Galis, I would announce to them, I wish 5 minutes, 6 minutes, Mr. Mayor. At Planning Commission, I would tell the chairman, can I get 15 minutes? And he'd say, no, Carl, you can't get it. You gotta hold it to 6 minutes or 7. Okay, fine, here's, bloop, bloop, throw that sheet away, let's get to the point and faster. And that's what I would do. Now, everybody that's gonna come up there isn't gonna be, agreeable with that maybe, but I tried to go along with things as best I could and get my point across. And, which I'm trying to do tonight, for just thoughts to think about and options for us to look at, okay? Not dictating a policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Richards. Councilmember Walton?
You know what, I don't have anything
Okay.
to say that's different from what we've already discussed, so
Okay.
I'm liking where we're going with this.
Councilmember Kurtzwell, do you have anything to add?
I'm in agreement with you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. All right. So I guess the question comes down to now, are we all in agreement with 2 minutes?
Absolutely. Are we, okay, so we are allowing for a waiver, correct?
I think that's fair.
Okay.
I mean, someone that comes to us, or even, obviously, I think we have a pretty good idea of when someone's going to need that.
Well, yes,
Right.
but I also think too, well, yes, I think we need to use our discretion, especially if, say, the individual's handicapped and they need a waiver.
Yep.
I think we should be able to use, common sense, but your discretion, Mr. Mayor,
Okay.
to do so.
Obviously, I think we're all a team up here, and so if someone had feedback on that beforehand, I'm going to take that into account.
Absolutely.
So,
But then, what if an individual wants to request, can they say, like, is there a certain way to go about it? Do they have to do that ahead of time? How would you proceed with a waiver?
You mean for a presentation?
No. So say someone comes to public comment and they have 2 minutes to speak, but then they know they're going to go over their 2 minutes. They have multiple things they want to address. Do we say, okay, hang on, you can either ask for a waiver or you'll have to wait and come back at the second public comment? Or can you do both? Is it just based upon discretion? I'm just asking to ask.
no,
It'd be really nice if we could, if the word would get out where if those were the circumstances, try to contact one of us before the meeting so that, there's some sense that that's likely to end up being requested.
I'll just piggyback on that. That's perfectly fine. I think when we see things coming down the pipe that will be in that level, possibly, that'd be great if someone were to reach out to us. I'm also open to, at least, I'm here almost 2 hours before the meeting. I'm not speaking for everyone here. I'm just saying that's usually kind of how it goes. And so if someone were to come in before the meeting and want to tell me that this is happening, I'd be fine with that too. And then I could run it by you guys and we'd, yes, no. And I don't know if we have to be that formal about that. I don't see it happening a lot, but I'm willing, whatever feedback you guys feel. Councilmember Kennedy?
I think it's a one-off situation. You deal with that occurrence as it actually occurs. I think when somebody is coming to address the council, the burden is, and the responsibility is on the person presenting to organize their thoughts, prepare them, and present them, just as Mr. Beagle did tonight. Okay?
Yeah, that's fair.
Presentation he provided, probably far less than 2 minutes. The presentation I made was about 1.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay? If you're organized, have your thoughts all in line, it's easy to get them across. If you're going to come up to the podium and freelance it, probably not going to be able to contain it in 2 minutes.
I agree.
So
I
it's
couldn't
a
agree
question
more.
of how important your message is to you to make sure that you get across everything that you want to convey.
The only reason I'm asking my question is I'm trying to think in my mind different scenarios where you have people, you have residents who will freelance.
Yep.
Most certainly. And you'll have residents who come up and who will be direct and bullet point what they want to say and speak to. So to cover all of our bases as a council, when that situation arises, I want to be able to recognize, okay, well, this is something that we're going to have mayor discretion where you can waive and give more time. Or you know what, you need to come back during the second comment or the second public comment.
Yeah.
So that's why, in my mind, are we structuring that in the sense where we're going to have a sure way to go, or it's going to be discretionary? And that's kind of why I'm throwing it out there, just food for
Yeah.
thought.
I think common sense and being reasonable should drive this. I mean, we establish these rules, it doesn't need to be written in stone.
Right.
You don't want to end up making it so soft that it means nothing.
Right.
But at the same time, it's not like we're inundated with people that come here and try to opine before our meetings. So how about we just
Give them the benefit of the doubt.
try to create a structure where we have a rule in the event that something starts going awry, we can always impose the rule more solidly, but try to just use common sense and a reasonable view of
Well-
where things are going.
And I guess, let me just make this point clear. People rushing the microphone during the meetings are no longer going to be recognized.
inappropriate at any
Okay?
cost.
I think we saw on Monday night how someone that may have feedback or information on something that's on the agenda can be noticed and professionally announced to the mic and handled in a very proper way. My concern is that going forward, and I'm just telling you, if we don't come up with a rule on our own here, how this is going to go going forward, that you will not be recognized. You will be asked to return to your seat. And if you refuse to do that, you will then put me in a position where I may have to ask you to leave. That's how that's going to be handled from here on out. Councilmember Parisian.
Okay, so now I think we're talking about two separate issues.
Right.
Yeah.
So
That's
now we're
during
talking
agenda
decorum.
items,
Yeah.
We're
right.
talking decorum in that sense, which I'll get to that too.
Okay.
But the perfect example was Monday night. Monday night, we had a resident come up who had something to speak to that was of interest to him. He had an interest in the game. And he was confused as to when he should speak.
Right.
Because he even asked me,
Yeah.
well, when do you speak? Should I come up at public comment or should I come up
Right.
at the agenda item?
And-
Hence why I asked you my question when I did.
Right.
So I think to clarify, that's why I'm kind of prodding this issue more so is because if I'm a resident and I want to say something at public comment, I want to know what all my rights are.
Right.
So if I come up and say, hey, can I ask for a waiver? Is that something I get? I think our residents should know what tools they have at their disposal to use them when they come to the microphone. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does, and I didn't mean to go off on a tangent about it because I felt like we were close to getting the public comment framework of this done. I just didn't want us to forget about some of the issues that we've experienced so far. And I think it's important that when we leave this meeting tonight, that not only we know how things are going to go, I want it to be crystal clear to the citizens of the community to know. So we really didn't talk about it in this structure where if someone wants to talk about something that, if they want to talk about something that's on the agenda, they can talk about it in the public comment at the beginning and in the public comment at the end. But we are not going to welcome them to comment during the meeting. Is that where we're at? Or is
I'm
that,
confident that there's going to be circumstances when we're going to request people that have some insight into something that we
Right.
don't know, doing it on our request is a different thing than having somebody just rush the mic.
okay.
So,
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that we're clear on it, and I want it to be clear to everyone else too. I don't, and that was a great example on Monday night, and in retrospect, I'm kind of glad that came up like that before we got to this meeting, because that was a perfect scenario of really how it should be handled.
now, I will say my personal opinion is, in the event that is the avenue that we want to take, I would like a sense of counsel to drive whether or not that's allowable or not. It's one thing to extend somebody's time in public comment.
Okay.
It's another thing to change the environment of the decision-making
And even-
apparatus.
Well, really, the whole discussion at that point, you're opening it up to another individual. So I would be willing, if you guys are, and I'm just throwing this out there as an idea, that if we see someone like that, or if we feel it's necessary to ask someone to come up and speak to us, do we want to do just a simple majority vote that would allow that? Does that sound fair?
I think that makes the most sense, quite honestly.
I mean,
Because I could see that becoming an abusive kind of a setup, where, you
and like I said,
Throw a
I
bunch
don't
of
see it
people in.
happening a ton, but I mean,
No, I
it's
don't
just- it's
either,
fresh
but-
in my memory from Monday, and it was, obviously, our, the individual had, an interest in what was happening and pretty good feedback on what we needed to possibly hear.
Well, that's the example of why you would actually want to entertain
Right.
this whole
Yes.
idea. But, I mean, we've had plenty of things over the course of the last year or so that were certainly staged events that, that could end up being manipulated, so.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, staged event, oh, boy, yeah.
Well, I'm optimistic about this. I mean, does anyone have anything that's really a barb in the jeans right now about any of this?
The only thing that we hadn't talked about is somebody coming with a presentation
Okay.
for public comment. This is another one I think that we should use some common sense. I mean, if it's something that's a community event that's coming up and they want to end up informing us or ask for permission for, or what are the rules for me getting permission to block off the bike path so we could have a run for something, or
Yeah.
one of those types of things.
And I'm just speaking off the cuff here. In my experience, whether on that side of the table or this side of the table, the people in businesses in the community that come to speak to us, or other councils at that point, usually reach out in advance and get put on the agenda anyways. I feel like that's not quite the same as the public comment, but I'm glad that you brought that up to make
But
sure.
that's usually when they end up doing their shtick.
Right.
So, yeah.
Councilmember Kennedy, go ahead.
Okay, and what I've seen, Glenn, going through the other municipalities, when that situation arises, they typically would have until 3 PM on Friday prior to the meeting to make that known to the city clerk.
Right.
Okay.
And she would put that on and let the council know that that is the
Right.
potential.
So-
As opposed to somebody coming up to the microphone, because they're not gonna do that on an ad hoc basis.
Yeah.
They know they wanna make that presentation, and if they
That's
want
an
to.
assumption.
And if they want to, typically, that is arranged through the clerk, typically 3 PM the Friday before, so that the council has time to accommodate it during their session.
So for us, and I'm just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. For us, that would be Thursday then,
Okay,
right? Because we get our packets on
Right.
Thursday. And I think it would only be fair to our staff here that works hard to put those together. They're usually looking to deliver those around 3 o'clock on a Thursday. So could we go with something back closer to lunchtime? Or maybe the day before?
Wednesday.
Yeah, do you feel like that's still enough time? I think so,
Certainly, because there's 2 weeks in between.
Right, yeah, because you've seen our packets, and you get someone coming in here on the 11th hour to add something that can be.
Are you talking about support documents and stuff, or, because, I mean, if they're just making their pitch and they just can imagine they need a bigger block of time, I mean,
You're right, yeah,
there
okay.
really isn't any, it's no skin off our nose of when that ends up becoming we're aware of that.
I guess if they're planning on talking or doing their presentation to us during public comment, I guess we could do the Friday at 3, or even really, that could be.
I don't know why we need any notice. I mean,
Right.
if they're
I'm just worried about
come
if they-
and make a request that they've got something that they need 5 minutes for going in, I don't think that that's a big ask.
I agree. I just, if they have materials that need to be included in the packet and possibly on the agenda, like,
Yeah,
as
that's
a
a
real
different story, right.
presentation, not so much as hey, we need to come in and.
Or a
for the-
projector
Right.
and that kind of stuff.
If-
That's a
yeah,
different deal
We're here
entirely.
to ask to shut down the block for a Kiwanis event or something, like, I don't think that we really need a time limit on that. I was kind of looking at it as more a time limit on someone that's going to be coming to do a presentation and wanting to be on the agenda to have it part of the packet.
Yeah, that's a
And they
different
maybe
story.
already have a deadline for that, I don't know.
They do.
Judy?
Yeah, we have a deadline. I'm just trying to think what it is.
Okay.
You guys have to remember that when something last minute comes in, holy heck breaks loose down in our office. We have to get something to Carl. We have to go to PD. We have to, do what we need to do. So again, what you're saying is, yeah, if it's something that needs to be added to the agenda, I agree with Rose. It should be Wednesday night
Okay.
or Wednesday before we leave at 5 o'clock, so
So
that
that way
when
we-
they start that, the copiers start going, everything starts going. Because keep in mind, we're still trying to do business as usual
Yeah.
and just stop everything and whatever. So I think Wednesday before 5 o'clock, so that we're ready to go Thursday morning to get everything started.
Okay, and so that would be if they would like to have stuff in the packet,
In the packet,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
and then.
If it's just a
If it's not
public
needed,
comment.
yeah, if they just need, say, we'd like 5-7 minutes to address you on something that's going on in our subdivision as part of public comment, I think that's a layup. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, we don't need to know ahead of time about
No,
public
right,
comment.
yeah.
It's just if you're speaking on something that's on the agenda.
Yeah, and I would even encourage, I could encourage that even up to meeting time, really. I mean,
I
that's,
think you do need to know about it ahead of time so that you know that when that person is up there, they're not under the 2-minute timeframe.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's a good
if
point.
the city clerk knows about it ahead of time,
So-
it could be an entry on the agenda so that you know this person has the extended time.
Yeah,
And
okay,
again, it's just for formalizing the process so that everyone's aware
Right.
of what's going on here. And it doesn't appear capricious on your part
Yeah.
that you let this guy go,
yes, that's,
And
and we're
everybody
trying
else
to
say, well,
avoid
what about
that.
me?
Yes.
okay?
I'll say something.
Go ahead, Councilmember Richards.
Okay, to what Steve's saying there, sure, it happened over the years during the comments, okay, on an agenda item. I wanted to come back, jump the mic or whatever it was, and say something during an agenda item, but I didn't, I just would stand at the microphone, I didn't get recognized, okay? So I went back and sat down, okay, that's it, okay. If the mayor doesn't want to recognize you, it just means he doesn't want to hear from it, it ain't going to make no difference or whatever, okay? And I was orderly about it, but some people aren't going to respond in that manner, okay? Therefore, I think it'd be a great idea to consider having the rules up on the big screen in back of us at some point in time, so people can know.
I think what we're gonna do, and I'm just copycatting from what I heard earlier, is I think it will be on the printed off sheets when people come in on the
Okay.
agenda.
Okay.
Because I don't know if you've sat here when that's on, sometimes that can be rough on us too.
Oh, it can?
Especially if it was on the whole meeting, because the lights have to be dimmed and, for people to be able to see the,
Well, all I can see is these two screens out here.
yeah.
Sometimes that's not too easy either.
No.
Just to-
So do we need to start trying to, what we've accomplished here on bullet points here and where we're at on everything? Is anyone,
Yeah, I've been keeping track.
okay,
So far I have that you're going to be keeping the time.
okay,
And you'll also be telling people, hey, heads up, you're at your 2-minute mark.
right,
They will be able to ask for a waiver if they want to.
Right.
Or it's going to be based upon discretion. If you choose to give them a waiver, allow them to speak longer. We've discussed the time limit so far. It's been unanimous that 2 minutes seems to be a good time limit. 2 public comments, one at the beginning and one at the end. We have not discussed decorum. We have not really delved into agenda unless, if I understand correctly, we allow residents to speak to agenda items, but only by a majority vote. Is that correct?
No, and during public comments, they can speak to either agenda items or non-agenda items. The point that came up that was subject to a majority vote was when, during the discussion of the agenda item, it became apparent that some council member requires additional information from the stakeholder in the audience. We would then, rather than just as, Councilmember Kurtzwell did the other day, asking the mayor's permission, take a majority vote to allow that discussion to take place for the agenda item that's currently under discussion.
Okay.
I got no problem with
Who
that.
makes the call on that thing? I agree with it also.
It's a majority vote.
And
It's
that,
a majority vote, Carl.
okay, but who,
So in the
Who
example
alerts
of
who to-
Monday, when Mr. Cottington wanted to speak.
Yeah, Mr.
it
Cottington,
became
yeah.
apparent. Maggie then asked, and then in the new way we would do it is, we would just put it to a vote really quickly.
okay, all right, fine.
Majority vote. Okay.
Okay.
We discussed presentations.
Yep.
And that there isn't, unless you have actual information to put into a packet to provide to council, there isn't going to be a requirement that they have to let us know ahead of time.
We said,
Unless-
what we discussed was if it was going to go beyond the 2 minutes, and it was, it was going to be a 5-minute presentation to get all the details across, the clerk needed to be advised of that so that it was called out on the agenda, so that the council knew.
No,
that this
that's not
person-
what we had come to a
We
conclusion
talked
on.
about this, The
You
council-
said that.
Well,
but
I did say
we
that.
didn't agree to that.
No, I'm just bringing it up that we discussed this. Now, the question is, if we have enough people that want to vote for that, it's just so the council is aware that there's one individual that's going to get up that is not under the 2-minute time frame that's been established, that's all. So he can easily differentiate between that individual and whoever else is presenting. And not that it appears to be a capricious decision on his part.
Mr. Mayor, if I could
Yes.
jump in, this is a great conversation. I think that you could probably find somewhat of a middle ground here where you can continue to keep it a discretionary act of the mayor, but just incorporate in the guidelines some of the discussion that Councilmember Kennedy has just suggested as well, that whether or not the person or the group consulted the city in advance and should have known that they were going to have a longer presentation or needed multimedia or things like that, that could be a factor that you consider in deciding whether or not to exercise that discretion if they just appear and suddenly want to do a long presentation.
Right.
So it isn't necessarily a checkbox yes or no. It obviously weighs in favor of the presentation if they come in advance, but then it could weigh against if you want to avoid that on a particularly busy day. And I think a lot of the things that you've been discussing, you probably will want to incorporate into the ultimate rules that you produce. Again, not as a checklist, but just as a set of considerations. So if you're putting it on the paper at the front of the auditorium or on the screen, the people know, well, if I ask for an extension, these are the considerations that will go into it. Maybe I'm, just have lots of new things to say, or maybe if the council is asking questions back and forth, those are some of the things you could consider as well.
Do you think that it would be best for us to maybe have them kind of listed at the bottom of the agenda?
I think that's a great idea.
I've seen that elsewhere. And Judy, please feel free to give feedback if you have anything on this.
Okay.
I mean, we don't want 24 bullet points down there, but it may be just like the framework on what it is we've went over tonight, especially since it's going to be kind of new to everybody. Or
Maybe we do a little rules page that is in a little folder over there. Rules if you want to.
that we could just print off a handful and then put them out every week. And
Exactly.
then we'd have the agenda next to it.
Rules
That's
if you would
actually,
like to speak.
because that's something we could put away and then bring back out the next
Right.
week. And we're not wasting paper. That's a great idea, Glenn.
I think I've seen it in other cities where they put it at the very bottom in just the most basic
Tiniest
comments
font.
of, please remember, public comments are limited to 2 to 3
Yeah.
minutes, and you will have the opportunity to speak before and after the meeting.
Yeah.
And that's it, simple. If those are the basic rules,
Yeah.
that little line item might not be a bad idea as a footer.
Yep, I agree.
And add something to the effect of, and all will be based on the discretion of the mayor.
Okay.
Yes.
And I've seen it both ways, where you have the note at the bottom, plus you have the separate document that can
Okay.
be referred to that maybe would get more detailed about the other things that are considered.
Great.
I don't have anything.
Anyone else have any direction on where we wanted to go from here? Or we?
Well, some of the other stuff in here, the idea of identifying yourself, none of that changes from where we've always been.
Yes.
So,
That's always a done.
yeah.
Councilmember Parisi?
I think decorum. Decorum is incredibly important, and Mr. Mayor, you did touch on that briefly. But we have had, just recently, a disgruntled resident come forward and stand at the microphone, and you had asked her to sit down, and she didn't listen, or you had asked her to stop talking, and she continued to talk. And I think it's incredibly important that what you do and your actions are going to set the standard for everyone.
I agree.
So by addressing decorum now, we're setting the stage for all of the residents to be on the same page.
Right.
So the next time an individual who might be a little disgruntled comes forward and says, hey, I don't want to sit down, you can say, okay, well, I've asked you nicely, please sit down. And I think it's like the 3 strikes rule, you're out. And then at that point, don't be afraid to use
Right.
your security. Don't be afraid to use the officer, because if you have an individual who is unruly or disrespectful, they're not abiding by the order that's supposed to be sustained in this room.
Yeah.
If you're not recognized to be spoken, you shouldn't be speaking. Everyone should have the opportunity to speak. They should be allowed to voice their concerns, but they should also be abiding by the same rules everyone else has to abide by. So with that being said, I don't think you should, as the mayor, have to worry about using your ability to escort someone out or not.
I'm glad you brought this up because I really wanted, one of the main things I wanted to come away from this meeting was knowing that everyone on this side of the table is very clear on how this is going to go going forward, and I want everyone that cares enough to know on that side of the desk to know how this is going to go. Because it's a tough situation to be trying to make that decision on the fly at times. And so I'm not saying it needs to be written in stone. I think there are, like we've said earlier, there's times where different opportunities present different issues. But I want us to come away from this meeting knowing that when I'm asking you or not recognizing you, it's not because what you have to say isn't important. It's we are limited into the time that we're able to get together in the legal ways that we have to do business for the city in an open meeting. We are available through email and personally on my cell phone, on my business card of the city is on me at all times. So I don't think it's fair for us to have to try and juggle that type of nonsense while we are trying to work. That's not fair to us because of the time that we have. We have a limited time to work together. And they can reach out to us at other times. And I understand there's going to be times where people are upset and they want to speak. And sometimes maybe we'll be in a position where we're going to recognize them. And sometimes I don't think we will. But that'll be up to us. And that's a good step. But I think you're right, Mary, and it needs to be fair for everyone across the board. I understand about wearing your heart on your sleeve. It's kind of how I am. So there's probably going to be some times where people just need a reminder that, okay, you're out of order. Please, return to your seat and we'll move on and everyone's going to be fine with it. There's going to be the occasional time where maybe that's not going to work, and I'm not going to be afraid to ask for assistance at that point in time is, I guess, where I'm at with it.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I could, and I think council is aware of this anyway, but there is in existence an enforceable city ordinance regarding disrupting a public meeting.
Okay.
So you would have legal support in that regard.
And after the
Thank you,
second
Chief.
request, I mean, that should have been plenty of notice that it's not the right time for them to step forward.
So, and I want to, like I said, I don't want people to think that it's not, we don't want to hear what they want to say. Sometimes I need people to understand that this is the only time we get to meet together to do city business. And we are available at other times for people other than just the meetings, especially for certain things like that, where people may be upset. So,
I want to say something.
Councilmember Richards, go ahead.
I want to emphasize that, as I've said before at other times, everybody needs to realize that we are the last line of defense to the public to keep this ship afloat and keep the machinery running properly. And I support your position. If you have to use that gavel to make sure the meeting operates on time, then it has to be done, okay? At your discretion. It's all up to you. The responsibility is yours, and whatever you decide, I support you. Okay? That's my position. That's all I want to say.
Outside of just the simple time component of that, we're all relatively smart people. We're all relatively familiar with the subject matter we're trying to make a decision on. And it's really quite distractive when we can't have our own moment to deliberate and come to a conclusion on our own when there's disruptions going on in the crowd. So I don't think that it's a big ask for us to expect people to know that and just roll with it. And not every item is equal.
Right.
We go through a wide variety of decision-making processes for different types of scenarios. So some things we're going to end up having, if not a need, maybe just a desire to reach out to somebody that might have some insight on something that could flesh out a nuanced kind of aspect of what we're talking about. And then other times that we don't really need a great deal of outside help
Right.
for, so.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Friesen, go ahead.
So I don't think it happens very often, but you do have the occasional disgruntled resident. And in the event that you do have a disgruntled resident and they come to the microphone and they're not listening to you, you give them a couple warnings and they're being disrespectful and not abiding by the rules that are set forth, then I think you have to play hardball. I think you have to set the standard
Yeah.
once because, like I said, it doesn't happen often. So if you allow it to slide,
Right.
then it's going to be setting the standard that it's okay, we could probably push them a little further.
Right, no.
So if it happens, and it doesn't happen often, but when it does, I think you really need to hit hard and hit home.
Yeah.
This is the message we're sending, that we as a council are here to work, we're here to get things done, we have rules that we have to abide by.
Right.
And there's rules that us as residents, or residents in general, have to follow too. So everyone gets their chance to speak, but we're just asking that you be respectful when you do so.
Right.
And that's not much to ask.
No, I agree, and I think what coming into this, along with kind of straightening up, and I wanted us to try and make these meetings as effective and efficient as possible. Obviously, we're here quite a long time sometimes. So I thought the second public comment was great and well-deserved for people that are here, and I know I'm repeating myself, but I wanted us to make sure that we're all on it. We don't need to all agree on it, but we do need to all understand that that type of stuff can't happen and will no longer be tolerated. I can be patient. You will be told you're out of order. You will be asked to return to your seat. At that point in time, at least for me, I'm just telling you, you may not get another warning. I may ask the officer to escort you out. But I can tell you, you will get one warning. But, I've never seen someone throw anything or anything like that, but you know what I mean? There's things that can escalate really quickly that you may not get the second warning,
Right.
I guess is what I'm saying.
Now, we've got existing procedure language, so is this going to be an amendment to the existing language, or are we going to start whole cloth and rewrite?
I don't know.
Language is pretty broad in the charter, so you could probably still keep it.
Well, we've got a procedural
What does the lawyer say on
resolution,
that?
so, the one that speaks to if you want to add an action item on the agenda
Oh, I
and
thought you were
all
talking
that.
about decorum, asking someone to leave.
No, I'm talking about
Okay.
this general.
Because asking someone to leave is already in our charter, like Chief had just indicated, and it's broad language, so.
Okay.
Yeah, what I was quoting was city code.
It's already in the
The
code, yeah.
ordinance, it's not the charter.
Councilmember Kurtzwell, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it was the ordinance.
So it's an ordinance?
It's an
I
ordinance.
think it might be in the charter too.
That's what I meant by city code.
Okay, yeah, same thing.
Okay.
No,
There's a city charter and a city code, but I'm pretty sure it's referenced in both, as a matter of
but
fact.
the city code is not the same as the city charter.
It's not the same, you're right, it's not, but the city charter, it also is referenced in, so that's neither here nor there. Let's focus.
Okay,
Bring
so,
it back
but to get back to it, do we feel like that we need to update either
Well,
of
we
those?
should at least look into
Okay.
how they might end up commingling. If there's any conflict in there, we will want to address it. I don't remember the breadth of the document, so.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
As I recall here from looking at it, the charter provides the ability to create rules for the council. It does identify some specifically. Then, of course, the code incorporates the public meeting disturbance issue, and then you have a separate resolution setting procedures for council deliberations. So we will want to make sure that all three of these pieces are speaking to each other.
Okay.
But probably the path of least resistance will probably be focusing on updating the resolution
Correct.
for the procedures.
Thank you. Great information.
I don't remember anything that would be conflicting, but I just thought we should make sure.
We don't really have any rules for the most part that are
That's-
specific.
That's what
Yeah, the
That's what
resolution
sparked
is,
this
and
meeting.
that's why we're doing this.
Because
So,
because I would have questions for when Tim is here and
Right.
And one thing you may decide to do is set up some rules for decorum in the procedures, and then maybe update your ordinance in the code to reflect those as a possible
Okay.
basis. Using that as well. So.
Councilmember
So
Kennedy.
this would be like the first step in that overall process then, is that?
Right, and as you decide what parameters you want to set, we can figure out where it would best fit.
Great.
Okay.
Is this sort of like fine tuning our existing ordinance referral to these matters?
Or for the ordinance's purposes, I think it would be more of a fine tuning. For the rules of the procedures for council deliberations, it seems like it would be more of a wholesale addition.
Okay, all right.
Good question, Paul.
Now, much to Mr. Beagle's comments earlier, the idea of speaking negatively about local businesses or people or whatever, that whole thing, I don't know how we quantify that, or qualify it, I should say. And, it's sort of the pornography, when you see it kind of thing, but there's not a definition of it kind of a deal. It just makes common sense. We're supposed to end up being the ones that are trying to make the city as attractive and propping it up as possible. If you have negative comments, do them privately. They don't need to end up being conducted in a public forum like this. If you want to do it as a member of the audience, that's one thing, but it shouldn't be coming from the dais.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Kennedy, please.
Okay, as was discussed previously when talking about public comment, the request is made of the public to discuss subjects in a polite and respectful manner. I personally feel that what's fair for the goose is fair for the gander. We should do likewise. Okay. And perhaps remember the adage that my folks taught me, that if you don't have anything nice to say, perhaps don't say anything at all.
Should we include that in our rules? Just kidding.
I kind of.
Yes, Councilmember Kurtzwell.
I would disagree with the comment. I think that criticism is healthy. I think criticism provides balance to the discussion. I'm not a groupthink kind of person. I never have been. I never will be. I'm not part of a culture that believes that playing nice sometimes will always win you the game. I think sometimes you need to say exactly what's on your mind, and if people find that offensive, then so be it. I mean, people say things to me all the time, and I think, and it may not necessarily be complimentary, but you move on with your life. So I'm not going to restrict my speech because Mr. Kivel thinks that it may be a little bit offensive. I'm going to continue to speak out and probably speak out louder than I have in the past, because I believe that the only time change sometimes happens is when you do become vocal and you do become very, very constructive with the criticism. So even though that may bother you, Mr. Kivel, I may suggest that you get used to it. So
Well,
I'm not
actually,
going away.
we're setting up rules that are going to be driven by the majority, not by a sole person on here. The idea of your bully tactics being used publicly on
Excuse
such
me,
a
point of
routine
order.
basis
Point of order,
is
Mr. Kivel.
just completely out of bounds. We should be able to.
Councilmember Kurtzwell, what is your point of order?
Point of order is that Mr. Kivel is providing a personal attack. I'm not a bully.
You are a
Defending
bully.
myself.
You are absolutely a bully.
Do you want to see my March 6th letter?
You're what?
My March 6th letter?
I have no idea what your
Well, I think
March
you've
6th
seen it, but
letter is.
I'll make sure that it becomes.
Okay, we're doing good here. We're making progress on the only item that's on the agenda tonight, so let's try and get back to that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not going to restrict my speech, and I think that if my speech is restricted, that it will provide me with an opportunity for a constitutional challenge to the rule. So I have an opportunity to say exactly what I want to say, as long as it's not defamatory. But if I've been in a business and I've gotten lousy service, I'm going to state it if I want to. If I've been in a restaurant and I'm watching ants sitting there eating on a French fry, I'm going to state it. I'm not going to hold back my opinion.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could just jump in.
Yes, please.
As you're thinking about these types of conversations, you do want to be very careful not to create a rule that's going to be viewed as content-based.
Right.
So keep that in mind very carefully. Decorum, it's not unusual at all for rules to address vulgarity
Right.
and germaneness and things like that. But it's true, because once you do start going down the road of what is criticism, and that can be a fine line you don't want to go down. But so I think there's probably a way to achieve what you're looking to do without doing it in a way that blanket says
Okay.
you can't say this, because that is the surest, a content-based approach is the surest way to raise flags.
I mean, I'll just tell it how it is. For me personally, is I'm a strong supporter of everyone's First Amendment rights. But certainly there is a time and a place sometimes for some of the constructive criticism. And sometimes a public forum may not always be the best place. So I will just say this going forward, without violating anyone's First Amendment rights, if I feel like anyone on this side of the table is getting too far off of topic and personally attacking someone, you will be asked to get back on topic.
Good. And Mr. Mayor, the law definitely supports you
Okay.
on that.
Okay.
So, yeah, those types of very common provisions.
Okay, well, I want to take this opportunity to make sure everyone knows where we're going.
And I want to make sure we all
Yeah,
know exactly
no, and I
what we're
appreciate your
speaking of.
feedback there. So, Councilmember Parisian, go ahead.
I kind of want to take a step back to what we were speaking about earlier about giving notice to the residents about speaking times, decorum, waiver, things of that nature. I like how Howell has it set up. So if you turn to Howell City Council meeting agenda, at the very bottom of the page, it says, visitors are cordially invited to attend all meetings of the council. If you wish to address the council, you will be recognized by the mayor. Please refer to the printed guidelines on the back of the agenda. And then if you flip it, it gives you public comment guidelines. And it's just a couple paragraphs of, hey, 2 minutes. Hey, here's your waiver. Hey, you will be asked to leave if you can't abide by X, Y, and Z. So I think that's a really great setup. Or instead of having it on the back of the agenda printed, you could say, please see the rules that are set next to the agenda.
Right.
So either way, you can incorporate both ideas of having it printed as just a footer that's at the bottom of every agenda.
Yep.
That's just a thought.
Yeah, I think we talked about that earlier.
Yeah, yes, you're right, yep. That looks good. I think that's something that we can probably,
Pages that on it.
once we get the process going and we get used to it, we won't even recognize it,
Because I don't
really.
think anyone reads our city charter, nor do they read our city code to make the distinction that they're two separate things.
Yeah.
Much have referenced the same thing, but again, I think that's why it's important that we reference the rules though as well.
Right.
So if you're going to have that separate set of rules, mention it here so that they can look to it over here.
Yep,
No, I never saw it. Thank you very much.
That's great.
Thank you.
so I guess I'll ask the question, do we basically take what we've accomplished here tonight and then we turn that over to Tim? Or do we just give it to the city hall staff and ask them to run with it? Where's our,
How it-
Mr. Mayor,
See how
Yes,
it
Chief.
fits with the procedures that we already have.
okay,
it would be my suggestion that because we have to coordinate and make sure that all three elements comport with each other, it would be wise to have the city attorney simultaneously work on all three.
okay. No, I think that's a great idea. Councilmember Kurtzwell.
In fact, I had an opportunity to speak with Matt prior to the meeting. Could you be the attorney to follow through, since you're here and sat through the meeting?
Council member, I have a feeling that I probably will end up with the assignment.
Okay, that'd be great, that'd be great.
But at the end of the day, Tim is the city attorney, but we work together very closely,
Okay.
so I can.
Great.
feel it
Well,
on
the reason I'm asking is because I always have a kinship to somebody who appreciates First Amendment. So I think you would be a good person to deal with that
I
issue.
certainly would be very happy to work on
Thank
it,
you.
and I've worked
Great.
on similar rules for other communities, so.
Great. Thanks,
That
Matt.
would be my suggestion,
Yeah,
that,
well, and he was here, so.
Yeah.
Did anyone have anything else to add to our effort here this evening? Okay, great. So I think what we'll do then is we will move forward to council comments. Did anyone have anything special to start with tonight? Councilmember Kurtzwell, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to respond to Don Beagle's comments tonight and remind him that what has changed on council in terms of congeniality, is that we have new council members here who are willing to work together and who are willing to solve problems. Second of all, what has also changed, Mr. Beagle, is that the public itself is more accepting of who is on council. The insults, the character assassinations, the attack on private citizens have actually come more from the public, of which you are a member of, and a certain Facebook site. So what is changing, Mr. Beagle, is not so much public as I see it, council as I see it, but it's the bitter factions in the city who have finally realized that the personal attacks on council have backfired because they did not address policy issues, but rather the attacks as made tonight by Mr. Kivel have been made against individual council members. As to election manipulation, Mr. Beagle, you are absolutely correct. There was election manipulation in this past election. I know because I work on elections, both local, state, and national. I analyze election data. I do some of that professionally. I do some of it as a volunteer. And I'd like to let you know that many of us in both the Democratic and the Republican Party took a very, very hard look at a particular election, and that was the South Lyon election for City Council. We took a look at the data, and we analyzed a particular precinct in South Lyon. It was precinct number 2. And there was a very specific reason why precinct number 2 was being looked at. You might want to take attention to this, Mr. Beagle, because,
I'm captivated.
well, you should be. I don't think you were part of the problem, but what was beginning to happen on Facebook is that we were beginning to see posts that were encouraging voters to engage in a voting strategy called plunking. Plunking is a voting strategy. It is not illegal, but what it does is it distorts the ability of a candidate who comes before the public to be elected. Plunking, I'm just letting you know, occurs when voters are instructed to vote for only one candidate on a ballot in which 3 or more candidates are up for vote. The voting pattern in precinct number 2 and in 3 have been analyzed in depth. We looked at Facebook postings again. We looked at people who were instructing people to vote for only one candidate. One of those individuals included a former council member. And some of those posts include, "I am voting only for one candidate." Plunking is frowned on because it does not give equal weight to each candidate on the ballot. It does not give an equal opportunity for a vote, but rather what happens in plunking is that the voter weights only one particular candidate. And we know who that candidate was because we looked at all the tallies in precinct 2. I spoke with the Southern Poverty Law Center regarding the plunking in precinct number 2, because if you are interested in ensuring that your elections are free from manipulation, you want to make sure that you are reporting evidence of manipulation to other parties for further analysis and critique. Why is plunking dangerous? Plunking is dangerous because it's a voting strategy that was used in the early days of the Ku Klux Klan to ensure that African Americans were not elected to the ballot. This was used in the Deep South, and as voting rights were given to individuals as we moved north, it was used to keep women out of office as we moved up through the Jersey area, New York. So plunking has a very, very ugly history. And when it is used in voting practices, it tells people like myself that there is something going on underneath a voting pattern in a particular precinct. So yes, Mr. Beagle, there was election manipulation. And the message to me and the message to others who actively engage in politics at the local level, the state level, and the national level, both Democrats and Republicans are quite alarmed by what we have seen in precinct number 2. Yes, there was very serious election manipulation. We know the candidate in which the plunking benefited. And all I will state tonight is thank you for mentioning election manipulation because it has given, point of order, because it has given me an opportunity to explain to the public what happened. For me, I encourage everyone to read the literature that you get in the mail that is delivered to your home and give each person an equal opportunity to be elected to public office, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, regardless of whether you know them or don't know them. Take the time to know who you're voting for. But please, I ask that you do not stack the deck, that you don't eliminate those candidates for public office which may not fit your locality's culture in terms of your gender or your race. Plunking is not something that I think should be acceptable in the city of South Lyon. No, this council comment, he doesn't have an opportunity.
Thank you, Councilmember
Excuse
Kurtz.
me, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Are we saying plucking or plunking?
It's plunking, P-L-U.
N? Thank you.
Plunking.
Councilmember Parisian?
Am I allowed to respond to that, or is that, am I doing my council
This
comments?
would be your council comments as well.
So I just think it's incredibly interesting that you're trying to steer this in a completely opposite direction, because I think it's incredibly obvious that there was election manipulation. And it's fairly obvious if you received a flyer from either Rose Walton, Joyce Klahusi, or Carl Richards. Because the
Or
flyers...
Inslee, too.
Or I have no idea what her flyer looked like, actually, so I can't speak to that.
Exactly the same.
But I'm, again, if your flyers look exactly the same, and they might have different literature, but they're the same exact format, just a different color, but literally to a T the same format, what are you running as a block, like as a group? So you want to talk about election manipulation. I'm not accusing anyone of manipulating anything, but when I get a bunch of flyers in the mail that look the same, and they're all running for pretty much the same seat except for Ashley, that raises a huge red flag to me. That says to me that you guys are running and that you have clearly worked together on this, which is fine, but that to me is raising a flag. So I think you're trying to steer the conversation from what Mr. Beagle is saying. Mr. Beagle is pointing out something, and he's not accusing anyone of anything. He's just simply saying election manipulation as a broad term that happened just this past election. You are trying to spin this now to make him look bad. You're trying to spin it to take the attention off of the two candidates that are sitting next to you. No offense. But let's be honest. And I think that's incredibly, first of all, it's incredibly rude to try to make this a discriminatory thing. That's awful. And you've done it to me before, and that's why I feel as though I have to speak up and say something, because you've accused people of being racist, of being criminals, of being liars, of being discriminatory against the disabled. But you don't know what those people are going through and walking in their shoes. So when you say comments like that, you have no idea what the individual actually is doing and what they're going through. So yes, you are in fact a bully, Maggie, because you are not putting yourself in a
Excuse me, Mr.
position.
Mayor, these are personal attacks.
No, I'm addressing your comment.
No, my comment did not
It is
address
freedom of
individuals.
speech.
Okay.
These are personal attacks,
You
Mr. Mayor.
you were personally attacking Don Beagle, and I'm saying just
No,
in broad
was not
that
attacking
you're,
him, was
you're
informing
spinning
him.
the situation. And again, you don't like it. You don't want me to point out the facts. And you can have as many people as you want come to the microphone and sit up here and attack me on your behalf or file grievances against me, which are completely frivolous and ended up working out well. But all I'm trying to say to you is you are a bully, and it's clear.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
obvious.
Mr.
So
Mayor.
aside from that,
Okay. Okay. We're
Aside
done.
from
We're
that-
done.
Okay, we're done.
Moving
Councilmember
on.
Parisian, I'm going to give you the floor back, but I would ask you to move on with your council comments, please.
Sure. So aside from the bullying, Mr. Beagle, I want to say thank you for coming to the microphone. Thank you for pointing out election manipulation. Thank you for pointing out the efforts that council is taking to better ourselves, because we are desperately trying. We are desperately trying. And I say that because I brought this as the sole purpose I brought this up, I think it was 3 or 4 months ago, was because of this issue. Because we have individuals in the audience who want to speak, that can't speak, that don't get the opportunity to. They have to sit through 4-hour meetings and don't get the opportunity to say something. But then on the other hand, we have members that do get to say things that are vicious and most of the time not true. So you have one end of the spectrum or the other, and I think we need to encompass a set of rules that addresses that. But the other part of my proposal was our behavior up here. and how we address each other and the attacks and our time limits on speaking. So this is actually a twofold proposal. We're addressing the first part. In June, we're supposed to be addressing council behavior on this end of the table, on this side of the table. So again, twofold, but I can't thank you enough for coming to the microphone and speaking your mind. That's exactly what we need. We need to point out the discrepancies. We need to point out the issues that are clearly one-sided. So thank you. And on that note, also thank you to council for moving this forward. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Parisian. We just met on Monday, so if anyone else has anything that hasn't spoke already, feel free to let me know.
Yeah, actually,
Councilmember
I
Kibble?
wanted to thank Don too for coming in here. This is something that, with some of the behaviors that take place up on this dais, I always marvel at the fact that people aren't just completely outraged out in the crowd. And then it dawns on me that most people are going about their lives with us having absolutely no influence on their lives. They're doing things, playing with their children, taking care of their homes and their relationships and their families. And I'm grateful for that, because I don't find an awful lot. There are very few times when I walk away from this building after a meeting and feel like we actually accomplished something really constructive. More often than not, I marvel at the ability of some people to drag things through the mud to the degree that they do. And it's really disappointing. It takes an awful lot of starch out of you. I was hoping that there would be lines of people saying, this has just simply got to stop. And I'm hoping you're the first one leading that line. So I really do appreciate your comments. And I think that everybody here has recognized that we've got some work to do. We need to end up trying to create some dynamics that will make this the constructive body that it really should be. Because everyone here has very important comments to make and have good minds and the best interest of this community. We just need to find a way where we unleash the positive aspects of it and try to get the vindictive aspects out of this discussion. So thanks again for coming up.
Good comment.
Okay. Councilmember Kennedy, please.
I'd just like to thank the council for taking the time to go through the council meeting procedure and making an effort to move us forward as far as formalizing and taking some of the subjectivity out of the manner in which the meeting has been conducted in the past, and actually making it a little more professional, perhaps, than we have operated in the past. So again, I want to thank the rest of the folks at the table there.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Ms. Walton, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to also thank Matt for being here tonight.
Yes.
His input has been invaluable tonight. We've gotten lots of good information, and thank you for doing that. Not that Tim doesn't.
Nope, you're right.
I'm just saying
but
that Matt has been
there was-
great tonight.
Just really quick, I want to piggyback on that. Thank you also, because there was a strong scheduling conflict with everyone else at Johnson
Right.
Rosati. So Matt, thank you. Go ahead,
Appreciate that.
Ms. Walton.
Thank you
And
again.
to remind everyone that tomorrow's weather is going to be quite warm. We have lots of local businesses with ice cream. Let's get out there and support Mickey's Dairy Twist, TCBY, Dairy Queen, whatever your flavor is, get it on.
Thank you, Councilmember Walton. Councilmember Richards, did you have anything?
Yes, please. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to correct something if I just think I misrepresented something in my closing comments at last Monday night's meeting. Okay, when I talked about, we were discussing a little bit about raising the rent on our tenant house with Mr. D'Alessandro. All I meant was that I've talked with the man. I visited the property. I've been there many times before he ever lived there. He's a disabled person, okay? We've done him a service, okay? And he appreciates it. I think it would be terrible if we pulled the rug out from under him and doubled his rent here before his time of a year, as he expressed to me that he was thinking about leaving in a year, which would be a little less, maybe 10 months now, okay? That isn't written in stone, but that's what he expressed to me twice. And if he's been a better tenant than most people ever could dream of having. Go ahead.
I don't know. I'm just, usually in that type of a situation, Carl, the individual is probably part of a lease agreement. I don't think the city can just say, you know what, we're going to bump that up, next month. I think there's probably a process for that. And I think it would probably, I don't know, I'm not speaking for the city, I'm just going on my past lease agreements. When that's up, it would then be renegotiated, or he could look for another
Yeah.
housing situation. So, go ahead.
My comments might have gotten misconstrued. Anyway, I just want to make sure that I'm doing my honesty to make sure Mr. D'Alessandro gets a fair shake from us and not spin it in a different way, okay? He's been a great tenant, does things for himself and takes care of some things on his own. And he and his wife are a very quiet couple. Who could ask for more, really, okay? And they pay their rent on time, and it's very nice with all the ladies at the desk.
Yep.
They all appreciate him. Anyway, another item, quick, okay?
Yep.
All right. As I said, I like to alert council to potential disasters on the horizon facing us, okay? That are sight unseen and don't seem to be in the forefront for discussion. But I think, I'll mention some at another time, okay? But I think we should consider making a position statement when we see a development going in the township, whether it's Lyon Township, and there's a doozy over in Green Oak, okay, that's going to put a serious impact on the quality of life issue in our town and the water table, okay? Everybody thinks it's not. They don't really haven't looked at the underground geology and situation and such. And I think we need to take a position and say, here's where we stand to the local governing neighbors, okay, the bodies, municipal bodies. And lastly, okay, this Saturday's our cleanup, our citywide, not the citywide, Yerkes drain cleanup at the Tube Mill parking lot. Larry's going to head it up as he does every year, and we're hoping for 60 volunteers and good weather. And I'll be there riding along and hobbling around with my cane. I don't know how much real work I'll do this year, but I certainly want to promote it, okay? It's a wonderful experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Richards. I'll make this really quick so we can get out of here. Right before spring break, I got a chance to go and visit some more of our second graders at Dolson. It was great to see them. Miss McGuire's class and the other second graders had a great time to kick them off onto spring break. And I will be out at Salem on Friday afternoon to see their second graders, so I'm looking forward to that. And then also, happy birthday to my brother today. So with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.